To celebrate reaching 100,000 subscribers on the channel, I will turn a fan's drawing into a 3D sculpt. This is the fan's drawing that I picked as a winner named Scarlet. This is the redraw that I did of Scarlet, and this is my version of the character in 3D. In this video, I will take you through the process of sculpting Scarlet in 3D, explaining my workflow for this character. Enjoy! To sculpt Scarlet, I am using Blender, a free 3D software. If this is something you are interested in learning yourself, feel free to check my channel for tutorials. That said, let's get right to it. I usually start all of my characters with a simple sphere and manipulate it to get the form of the head. In this case, I will try to approach the whole character by starting with simple forms and slowly adding details as I advance. This will help you ensure better proportions and also help you avoid ending up with a wacky character. Just saying. I will now start creating the basic form of the body. For this character, I am using something called the skin modifier, which allows me to quickly manipulate single points to get the base of the whole body, of which I will then sculpt on to further improve the forms. Of course, some anatomy knowledge is required, and the use of reference is highly recommended in general. Here I will add a floor for the character to stand on. This will help with sculpting the feet or shoes. Now that I have the base of the character, I will jump right to the head and sculpt the landmarks. I like adding the eyes early on to decide on the distance between them, which will help me with the proportions of the rest of the face. I do that by adding a sphere and mirroring it on the other side. I then place the eyes in the eye socket and sculpt the eyelids. I am now slightly indicating the nose and the mouth. It is a good habit to indicate all of the important parts early on before you jump into the details. Again, if you don't, you will likely end up with some seriously messed up proportions. Keep in mind, the human head is a lot more complex than it might seem. Even with a very stylized character like this one, subtle changes in the form can make or break the character. So, the better you understand the anatomy of the face, the better control and results you will get of any type of character you are creating. Even though the face is still far from done, at this point it is starting to get a bit more detailed than the body. So here I will shift my focus back to the body and get it on the same level. For the eyebrows, I am using a technique where I add a few points that will automatically be placed on the surface of the sculpt with the help of something called the shrink wrap modifier. I use this method for two main reasons. First, I can still further sculpt the head and not worry about the eyebrows since they will follow the new form on their own. And I can easily change the position of the points of the eyebrows to make different shapes and expressions. You will see me do that to create her slightly angry look later in the video. I will start covering in some details such as the nostrils while keeping things simple at this stage. At this point, you will also notice that I am not paying much attention to the ears and the top of the head in general. This is because in the character design, we won't be seeing these parts due to her hairstyle. Speaking about the hair, now it's time to change my job as a sculptor and become a hairstylist. There are many methods for creating the hair. For this character, I will use something called curves. I predefined how the shape of the curve will be, and now I simply have to control the points and duplicate her hair strands to get the hairstyle that I am looking for. This, by the way, is not as random as it might seem. I am placing the roots of the hair strands in a way that would make some sense, kind of like how it works in the real world. The hair is still far from done. She has a bald spot at the back of the head, and also the front part should be revisited as well. I just wanted to get enough hair strands to lock in the basic form of the head. As for the breasts, I find it generally easier to create it separately than merge it later on with the body when necessary with something called the Boolean modifier. This holds true for any parts that overlap each other, like the armpits for example. However, in her case, I wouldn't even need to merge the breasts with the torso since I will add a t-shirt that will cover that part later on. Now that I sculpted the general proportions of the body, I can use it as a way to create the clothes. To explain how I use the body to make the boots, I will walk you through the same technique with the t-shirts. Here I will make a duplicate of the body, so there is actually two overlapping each other. I then create any form like a modified cube to remove the lower part of the duplicate body, another one to remove the arms, and a third one to remove the head. Now I am left with the torso. I will scale that and start sculpting the t-shirts. I use the same method for the jeans and the rest of the bottoms as well. I am now adding some flat colors in the viewports to make it look pretty. This, however, is not actual materials that you will see for the final results. I will get to the materials and lighting later on when I finish the sculpt and pose the character. For the neck collar, I will use the same method that I used for the eyebrows. Okay, now time to jump to every artist's worst nightmare, the hands. To be honest, it isn't really that difficult once you understand the form and practice it enough. The darker area of the body is basically a mask that I added so that I don't accidentally modify the body while sculpting the hand, since they are attached. I am now pulling out the fingers with a sculpting brush called the snake hook. I then refine them till I get the shapes that I want. The hands will look horrible at first, but with some patience and work on it, you will get it done before you know it. I will quickly add the wristbands like I did with the eyebrows and neck collar, then I will jump back to the boots and shape the heels. For the upper part of the boots, I will add a separate object since it will overlap the boots itself. This will make sculpting it a lot easier. I will then model the belt like I did with the eyebrows, then I will add a sphere to sculpt a simplified skull for the belt. You will notice that I keep repeating a lot of techniques I previously mentioned over and over again. These methods can be used in many different ways to create anything you want. For the laces of the boots, it is more or less the same method as the one I used for the hair. I also decided to add some more visual interest to the boots by creating some buttons. This was done with good old traditional 3D modeling. At this point, I felt bad for her bald spot, so I went back to her hair to finish it up. You will also see me add some smaller hair strands to make her hair shape more interesting instead of having one hair strand size all over. To cover any spaces between the hair strands, I will add a sphere with the same color as the hair and shape it around the head. This is a great trick to get things done without overdoing the amount of hair strands you add. Now I will add some eyelashes. For this, I will more or less use basic 3D modeling. At this point, I believe I was around 5 hours into the sculpt, more or less. I pretty much have all of the elements down, but I still needed to refine the face, eyes, lips, and the rest of the character in general. Now you will see me model over the character and might wonder, why am I doing this? This is what we call retopology in 3D. I don't want to overcomplicate explaining why this is done, but in simple terms, it is to create a version of the sculpt that is more manageable. This is not a technique that is always required. It will depend on your end goal. Now I did this for the whole character, but since this part is a bit too technical and for the purpose of this video, I will skip showing it. After I finished retopologizing the character, I continued refining the head for a bit. That said, the character sculpt is more or less ready for rigging and posing. Okay, so now it is time to make Scarlett move. To do that, I need to create an armature, which is like a skeleton for a 3D character. This will simply serve as a way to move the character around. It will not appear in the final render. It gets a lot more complicated than that, but you don't have to worry about the details. Just see it as joints that the body will follow. I will give her a pose similar to the one I drew from my fan's drawing. Once I am done, I will save that pose in my library and use it later on. Putting her back to her original pose, I'll refine the sculpt to add some things like folds and wrinkles to the clothes. I'll do some of it while in the neutral pose so that I can make use of symmetry, and the rest of it while she is in her new pose, since clothes folds differently depending on your position. I will also give her a slightly angry and serious expression like in the concept by moving some of the points around. Keep in mind, the eyebrows play a big role in a person's expression. Now that I finished her pose, I will quickly model her scythe. I didn't want to overcomplicate the scythe. Instead, I will add it in a way to serve the composition of the image. For example, you will notice how the scythe turns back to her face, which is where I want to guide the viewer's eye in the final image. Here's where we turn all of this hard work into a pretty awesome looking final render. I will create the lighting for her and add some materials. Don't confuse texturing for materials. For this particular character, what you see are mostly materials that I created without any texturing. The only exception is her red lipstick, but even then it was a simple 5-minute texture job. Okay, so this concludes it for this character. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a thing or two. Now if you didn't know, I released a video before this one to show how I redrew the fans drawing Scarlet, and I spoke about why I chose her as the winner and talked about Scarlet's background story. It's pretty much interesting, so go check it out. I'll add a link to that video in the description below. Now don't forget to like and share the video, also subscribe to the channel for tutorials, character sculpts, art advice, and more awesome content. I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more awesome character sculpts and art related videos. You can also check out my store for full courses on character sculpting, texturing, materials, brushes, and more. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, then you will definitely enjoy the next one.